So my wee bit of history today is going to be about fencing or sword fighting. And so I got a few tools here that you might be wondering. I've got my long knife, my tomahawk, my throwing hawk, a war club, and you might be wondering, what do they have to do with fencing or sword fighting? So they have nothing to do with it, and yet they have everything to do with it. So I had the opportunity to be tutored by some very knowledgeable fencers, and they have a very active club down near the Quebec border, Hawkesbury, Alexandria area, and they were not only enthusiastic historians, but great instructors. In fact, they're certified instructors, and they tutored me through some of the choreographing, the different types of moves, and how even though we know fencing is old, so manuals will date back to the 14th century, but there is historic reference back as early as the 12th century. And those techniques, they can be employed in the era that Kathy and I portray, which is the 18th century, when these were common tools. So the sword, and while I'm speaking about the common tools, so the techniques are going to be used in defensive methods of attacking, defending. The different strokes that were used with sabers are employed with these very tools. It's interesting to note that in the time period, the 18th century, although the sword now has become a secondary weapon, if we look at some of the documentation, when individuals were called up to be mustered into militia groups, they had to bring a flintlock musket in well-working order, lead shot, as well as an edged tool. Now, it didn't specify the edged tool. More often than not, it would have been a tomahawk, probably a poled axe, sometimes a pipe axe, but more often than a poled tomahawk. And often a small saber, a small sword were very common in that time period. So anyway, I don't know all the subtleties. These guys are going to explain it for us, and I hope you enjoyed as much as I enjoyed my learning experience with them. Point out, if you want to see how these tools were employed using the movements of say, the Highlanders from Scotland during the Battle of Culloden, if you watch the movie Last of the Mohicans, and you'll see the Fort Henry's been taken, they're in retreat, the British Army, and all chaos breaks loose, and we see Daniel Day-Lewis fighting with a long knife in one hand and a tomahawk in the other. And you're going to see those very techniques that these young people are going to demonstrate to us with their broadswords and their other types of swords, which they're also going to explain. Very knowledgeable, and yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
This is a training small sword, so you can see we have a little bit of a taped tip on it. But the small sword was an only thrust-based weapon, so it could only be used in an action where it was getting pushed forward. It can't cut, it didn't have sharpened sides. As you can see, this one is triangular, and this gives it a little bit of extra rigidity. Now this one is a training one, so it's got quite a bit of flex to keep us safe as we're fighting. But the small sword has a wide array of history. Most notably, the French picked it up after the Italians and the Spanish started to pick up the rapier, which was a similar weapon, just a little longer, mainly used on the thrust, though they could cut with it. The small sword got picked up very prominently as a street weapon. So it was used from high class members of French society all the way down to much lower classes as a street weapon. Got really popular with the Scottish right around 1700 and got used all the way up to around a little bit past 1800, and had a wide array of use, mainly street fighting, not a lot on the battlefield.
Yeah. So this is more of a training weapon called a single stick, which was complementary in teaching broadsword with the small sword, which when you look at manuals from masters such as Zachary Wilde and the Angelos, it would focus a lot on small sword to teach thrusting and then transition to a single stick, which is a cut-only weapon. You can stab with them, but it hurts quite a lot, and you really shouldn't do it. So this was something that young Highland children could pick up with at any time, really any age, and learn the cutting mechanics and the body mechanics to use a broadsword.
After that, we have the Highland Broadsword. This was a broadsword that was made by our club armorer. The broadsword is a cut and thrust weapon, meaning that it could be used in an action to push forward or in an action to cut on the blade. We're pretty prominent in the clan system in the Highlands until the abolishment of the clan systems after Culloden, when they start to get picked up and continue to exist in the military system. The main reason for the shift is you went from the broadsword being a primary weapon to it being a secondary weapon in a group of men that would have been carrying muskets.
So Pearson and James are going to do a number of fencing demonstrations. They don't have all the protective gear, so they're going to be very controlled in their fencing to maintain safety. They're going to be fencing first and foremost with the small swords, and what you're going to notice is that the attacks are with the point, and that they're going to use the strong of their blade, which is the third of the blade closest to the hilt. They're going to use that for protection, and it's very small movements in order to deflect a thrust. So all of the movements of the sword are in a very, very small area. They're also going to be doing some demonstration fencing with the broadsword. Again, very, very controlled. You're going to see that the movements are much wider. The attacks are done both with the edge and with the point, but mostly it is done with the edge. And so the defenses are also using the edge and also using mostly the strong of the blade to defend against attacks that are mostly coming with the foible or the weak of the blade. The body mechanics are going to be a little different between the two. And in broadsword fencing, you really use your body and something called equilibrio to use your entire body to move the blade. It's not that much different than the way people would box, where it's not just the arms that are doing the boxing, but you're using your entire body to deliver that punch. So I think without further ado, we'll get the two of you paired up and ready to bout with your small swords. All right, gentlemen, we're going to keep this a very controlled match. We won't go as fast or as hard as I know both of you are capable of. On guard, fencers ready, fence. Point to Pearson. Fencers on guard, ready, fence. Keep fencing. Point to Pearson. Fencers salute. Fencers on guard. Fence. Double, no points. On guard, fence. Point to Pearson. So James and Pearson right now are doing something called Zachary Wild's throwing the guards. Zachary Wild was a fencing master. One of the 4 disciplines that he published on was the broadsword. And this was a drill that he was extremely proud of, that he felt it captured a lot of the skills that would be required of a fencer in their own defense, and it would develop them physically to be able to fence. So now James and Pearson are doing another training drill that comes from the very end of the 18th century. Again, this is a training drill that develops the fencer physically and employs all of the defenses and the attacks that a broadsword or saber or cutlass fencer would need to have. So now Pearson and James are doing something called the 7 cuts and thrusts plus guards, which is another type of training drill that comes from the end of the 18th century. So now Pearson and James are doing that same training drill, the 7 cuts and thrusts plus guards, but they're doing it as a paired drill. And you can see how all the attacks and the defenses work. So this develops the fencer's instincts against all of those attacks. So both Pillar Willis and Pearson Fraser are students at the McCullough School of Dance. Right now they're demonstrating part of a fling. Highland dancing, of course, is incredibly old, and its origins were that it was a training system for training fencers. So children at around age 8 would start to learn to fence with a stick and to Highland dance. And Highland dancing physically conditioned fencers to a phenomenal level. But all the body mechanics actually have fencing application. Here we're going to show one of the classic fencing attacks to the leg, where Pearson is employing a leg slip that comes straight from Highland dancing. At the same time, he's delivering a cut 7 straight down on the head. So this is a perfect example of footwork that's developed in Highland dancing and has a direct application to fencing.